I want to show you the top 3 Microsoft AI tools that I'm currently using to help improve productivity in my day-to-day work life. The first is going to be using Power Automate AI features such as sentiment analysis to determine the sentiment of emails that we receive. Then I'm going to be talking a lot about SharePoint Agents and showing you how it can boost things like employee onboarding, sales materials, and so much more. Then I'm going to show you our Copilot demonstration of how we're using Copilot throughout Outlook, Word, Excel, and even PowerPoint. So stick with us and I'm going to show you how you can use Microsoft AI to boost your productivity. So the first tool that I'm going to be talking about is the AI sentiment analysis that's available inside of Power Automate. Now this is a real world use case that I've mocked together a bit of a proof of concept just to be able to show you. Now in this scenario, what we built was a tool which was taking inbound emails and then determining their email sentiment, whether they were very positive or whether they were very negative, and it can even give you a percentage score of how positive, how negative that it believes that that email was. We can then basically have certain automated actions which come off the back of it. So if it was very negative, it might be that we choose that we want to escalate this, class as a P1 support ticket. If it was something that's very positive, maybe it gets automatically emailed to our marketing team because there might be a case study or a testimonial that might come off the back of it. Of course, this logic could be used for all sorts of different types of sentiment analysis. We've seen it in the past before for doing things like scraping social media, like Facebook or X, to get company information. So in terms of where somebody has been, say, tagged a social media post with a company name, we can scrape that information and then use our AI sentiment analysis to determine whether it's positive or negative, and even maybe automatically respond. So if it was, for example, very positive, we could say, hey, great, this is fantastic news, thank you very much. If it was very negative, again, maybe we then create a support ticket internally and then get someone from the customer success team to follow up with it. In this scenario, you can see I have this deployed to my own kind of test mailbox, and I've got an email that's come in here to say your product is terrible, it broke instantly, and I want my money back right now. Obviously, very negative, and we need to action this straight away. So what we then end up with is a workflow which gets triggered in the background. So in Power Automate, we have a workflow which is called Notify Me on Teams when I receive an email with negative sentiment. You can see that this has been triggered, and I can go into the actual case itself, and I can see within here, this is the workflow. This is actually the steps that it follows. So without getting too boring and technical, I'll just give you a high level. The email comes in, and we can specify this to be a specific mailbox, even a shared mailbox, or even a folder within a mailbox. It will then get the email and pass it through to the analyze positive or negative sentiment in your text, which is an AI feature of Power Automate. It will then output what it believes as a set of parameters, a set of variables essentially, and it will then get my profile. So in this case, what we're doing is we're sending a Teams message, but equally it could easily just be an email which gets sent somewhere, for example, or maybe rather than being a Teams chat message, it could be posted into a Teams channel or thread. There's so many different options here. Now, the condition on here basically is if it's negative sentiment, then send me a message inside of Teams to let me know so I can follow up with it. We don't actually have something here on the other side, which in this case would be if it was positive. But of course, you can see we can easily build that out. So if it was positive, maybe it goes down a totally different route. We then have our ability to have the Teams message, which comes through. Now, the Teams message would look something along the lines of this. So you can see here saying, hey, Dougie, you received an email from, and this is obviously just my test email address, with a negative sentiment. Here's a snippet. Your product is terrible, blah, 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 and the message where it comes through from. So that's the email message that's sent to me. So I can see the full details. Of course, I could give more details like this if I wanted to. So I say the email just where it comes from, maybe any other information that we've got on it. we've done things in the past before where we've looked up based on the email address whether we've got any of the customer details on record already. So maybe we could pair it to a recent order or an invoice or something like that as well. We could pair it to data that we know we've got automatically in the system. Now, again, we could build on this further if we wanted to. I say there's loads of different types of AI options inside of Power Automate. So let's just take a look at some of the AI actions that we can do. So we've got things like save to AI builder feed, processing invoices, analyzing sentiment, which is what we're using here, detect objects in images. So it might be, say, for example, it doesn't have to be an email. It could be based on a document which is uploaded. There's loads of different types of triggers that it could be. It could be even integrating to a third-party app completely. But I really like this. I think detecting objects and images is fantastic because you could have a picture and then maybe it could work out what objects are in there and tag them. Processing receipts, again, really useful for kind of finance-related tasks. Detecting language, predictions, and running a prompt as well. So you can see here there's loads of different things we can do to integrate AI directly into Power Automate. The next Microsoft AI tool that I want to talk about is called SharePoint Agents. Now, SharePoint Agents are essentially chatbots which are layered over the top of specific SharePoint files or folders that you've selected as its source of knowledge. Now, I'm going to show you a few different examples, starting off with this example, which is our Cloud agent. Now, what this is specifically is for our salespeople here at Valto. Now, our sales team answer queries that come from all sorts of different types of prospects and leads, and basically our salespeople can't be necessarily the full knowledge experts of every last intricacy of where leads are coming from. And one of those places is what we call Cloud, which is essentially where all of our public sector work comes from. Essentially, it's an online portal, it's a .gov portal, where all of our kind of services are listed. Now, the way that we interact is slightly different than maybe if it was a private company we're dealing with. So sometimes there's going to be questions which come up from our salespeople about how to interact when it comes to a Cloud transaction. Now, what we've built is this Cloud agent, which essentially is looking at a set of basically a set of documents and files and folders which live inside of our SharePoint site, and then we have a SharePoint agent which we can easily overlay over the top of this, and basically we can access it either as a shared link, so we can access it in a browser, or you can even embed it into Microsoft Teams. Our salespeople can ask it questions, so maybe we could say, what services do we offer on Cloud? And this is then going to look at all of the different information SharePoint agent that we have inside of this able to knowledge base, which this but now you can see it's come back with all this information. Now this has pulled this out of quite a few different areas, and it's combined it to say here's all the different services. So it's broken it down by our core areas, so modern workplace and security services, cloud infrastructure services, AI and Power Platform services, SharePoint services, and our workshop specific services, as well as additional things like backup and recovery, and some additional information that might be
This makes it really easy
for us to ask questions. Our salespeople get informed. So maybe it might be something like question like, please can you give me more info on our SharePoint intranet service that we offer on Cloud. So you might want to delve specifically into a service and get a little bit more information. And again, this is now sort of looking through all the information that it's had, and it's now found that we have a number of different SharePoint services, including internet design, build, and support. And you can now see it's listing out all the kind of overview of the service, as well as any related offerings as well. And it's also referencing the files that it's found, so I can jump directly into the specific file areas as well. The thing that I like about SharePoint Agents is it understands contextually what it is that you're kind of currently talking about, and it'll start giving prompts. Down at the bottom, we can see here, specific prompts. Now, this is what SharePoint Agents itself has come up with. So maybe it's break down what's in each intranet in a box tier, compare SharePoint intranet to other modern workplace services, list typical project steps for SharePoint intranet build. That's a really good question. It's probably a question that a salesperson might follow up and ask the SharePoint agent. So again, it's starting to understand the conversation that I'm currently having backwards and forwards with the SharePoint agent, and now it's starting to provide more questions itself. So now you can see it's breaking down, saying, okay, this is the way that we engage with our SharePoint Internet projects. There's a scoping phase, there's a design phase, there's a build phase, we have content migration phases, testing, launch and adoption, and then ongoing support. So it's bob on perfect, and it's summarized very quickly the step-by-step process. So say, for example, as a salesperson, and we had a lead come through from G-Cloud, and someone was asking a question about what steps do we take to deploy our solutions. We've got literally a step-by-step guide that is provided here, nice and simple, and it's summarized exactly the types of information that we need. Some other examples of SharePoint agents. So we've also done something very similar with our policies. So we have our policies stored inside of SharePoint. And in fact, actually, we have customized SharePoint. So we have a policy management system which has all of our documents have version numbers. It has an approval status. We have a reviewer who's responsible for updating the policy, an approver, and then we have a workflow in the background essentially which makes sure that at the review date, an email sent to the reviewer to make sure that they stay up to date. By contacting the reviewer, they update the document, submit it to the approver, that gets published for approval. It documents down the approval date, and then also we have what we call our tracker group, which is essentially like a read receipt list. So it sends to specific people to get them to confirm that they've actually read that specific policy document. So we know that these policies now are all 100% up to date. They're really clean, and we're happy for all of our employees to be able to access this. Now, rather than just giving them a link to a SharePoint site with all these different ask specific questions,
files within there,
again, putting ourselves into the shoes of a SharePoint agent where they can go, what are the types of questions we are most likely going to ask a policies chatbot about our day-to-day work life. Now, the other thing I should mention about SharePoint agents is you can also change the initial prompts. So the first prompts that we saw the previous agent were just the stock ones, the standard issue ones, but we can change them. So common questions that we think that potentially Valto employees would ask a policies agent might be things like, how many holidays do I get a year? What day of the month do we get paid? What is our policy on working from home? So we can select one of these, and then you can see it automatically puts into the prompt here that question, and then by posting it, it's then going to take a good look at all of the policies, procedures that we have stored inside of our policy management system, and it's then going to pull out the most relevant information for us to basically answer that specific question. Of course, we can also give kind of follow-up questions as well, and also the SharePoint agent is going to come back with a few different suggestions of how we could improve the prompts that we're asking it for. So there we go. We've got the answers come back now. So it's pulled through to say, you asked about how many holidays you get per year at Valto, and then it's brought through the core information I need. So we've got 25 days paid annual leave, plus 8 public holidays. That's 33 days of annual leave in total. All the relevant information that it thinks that I would also be interested in is like the flexible holiday scheme. So it's pulled through information here to say that we can buy and sell up to 5 days. You must take at least 20 days of annual leave each year, regardless of buying or selling. And there's some additional notes around here about the flexi window and how you can buy and sell. Now, again, the SharePoint agent has then come up with a couple of different ideas that I might potentially want to ask as follow-up questions. How do I buy extra holidays? What's the process for selling holidays? How do I check my current holiday balance? So I might want to say, how do I buy extra holidays? So again, no one's prompted this SharePoint agent to actually give me that information. It's just come up with it itself. So here we go. You can see it's powered by Copilot, and now it's got me the answer. So it's basically telling me all about the flexi windows, how many days we can buy, the application process, how the pay is adjusted, all this kind of information, and it's all generated from documents that it's found inside of SharePoint. So it's basing all of this on what it's found inside of the flexible holiday policies, and you can see where it's referenced certain documents, we can jump directly to them from the chats that we actually have. Then the final way that you can use SharePoint agents is to basically ask questions across the whole of the SharePoint site. So in this example, we're actually looking at this as part of our onboarding process. We can potentially go to our SharePoint site and then ask specific questions. So by clicking on the Copilot button across the top, it's actually opening up Copilot in SharePoint. And you can see here, I'm on my onboarding site. So this is an onboarding site, which essentially has more information about the company, how you get started, task lists, things like that. But I might want to ask a question to the SharePoint site of information, say, what does my first week look like here at Valto? And then it's breaking it down. So based on all the information it's found, it knows that there's an onboarding journey, it knows that there's key information and policies that I should be reading as a new starter. It knows about the kind of Valto Academy, which is a series of videos that Valto offer to onboard and basically get everyone up to speed. We have the employee benefits, which is essentially a page of information of all the different things that you can claim as an employee, and meet the leadership team, information on the senior leadership team and management, and career progression and pay scales here at Valto as well. So again, there's follow-up questions that we can pull out here, but I just wanted to show you how we can pull information directly from SharePoint using this agent model. The third Microsoft AI tool is what everyone's currently talking about, and this is Copilot for Microsoft 365. Now, I'm going to be telling you a story about how here at Valto, our consultants are using this across these key Microsoft products. Now, the story starts off inside of Outlook. Think of kind of as a consultant, most of what we do is starting off our conversations with our clients often takes place in an email. Now, I don't know about you, but I sometimes get email threads which are not just weeks, but months, maybe even years long sometimes. And essentially, this is what we're kind of starting off here with. This is a very long email thread. And as a consultant, trying to figure out what it is that I'm being asked to do. Essentially, what it is that a client has contacted our salesperson, Sam in this case, and has purchased a SharePoint workshop. Sam's then forwarded this email on to me asking that I book in a workshop, but I want to get the core information out of the email before I reach out to the client to book in the workshop. So rather than going through the whole email and scrolling through it, I can click on the summary by Copilot. This is now telling me that Joe Bloggs, who's the client, has reached out to Valto for assistance in building a SharePoint intranet. Sam's asked if I could basically book in the workshop with them, and there's some details in here that the client said that they're available on Wednesdays and Thursdays, and Sam's asked that I book it in to go ahead and do that. Now, before I book in the workshop, often what I will do is I'll contact the customer and I will just get a bit of information from them, maybe even book in a 15-minute call with them just to get a little bit more info from them. So I've typed in here a little bit of a prompt, say please write a response to Joe Bloggs and ask them to book in a 15-minute consultation. You can see with Copilot also we can change the tones of voice. We can ask it to be more direct, neutral, casual, formal, or for some reason you can even make it a poem. You can also have the length to be shorter, medium, or long. Or if you wanted to, as part of your prompt, you could ask it to use a certain tone of voice. Be funny, be casual, be very professional. You can change that as part of your prompt as well. But in this case, I can say, I want it to be quite casual. I want it to be a long message. I'm just going to draft up a message based on what it understands of the email context so far. And here we go. It's drafted something up. Say, hey, yeah, I'll book in the workshop. How about a quick introduction call first to compare calendars and see where we can book in the actual schedule. As I say, we can always refine this by clicking on the three dots. We can always say, make this longer, make it shorter, make it more formal, or you can even free type into the prompt, say anything you'd like to change. And by selecting something, it can then automatically change and update that for you before you then send that out to the actual customer. So now we've, as part of this story, we've booked in our workshop, and our workshop is now going to take place inside of Microsoft Teams. Now with Copilot, we can actually use Copilot not just after the meeting. We're going to take a look at this later on, but actually a lot of people think that Copilot is only for kind of generating meeting actions or summary notes and things like afterwards. You can use Copilot in live time during the actual Teams meeting. So during the workshop in this case, I can actually type into Copilot certain things. Like I might type in, for example, how can I generate more ideas? So what questions could the group ask to get more ideas? So it's aware of everything we've talked about so far in the meeting, and so where what we've not talked about. So as part of the SharePoint workshop, it might say, or we've not talked about actually how can we leverage SharePoint to enhance our collaboration. So maybe that's a good idea as a starting point to generate more ideas for the actual meeting. We can also use it to capture key requirements. So as a consultant, I want to know basically for each participant in the meeting, what is their biggest concern and what are they most excited about. You can see here I've also said keep it short, because sometimes with AI it can be a bit waffly even more than I'm waffling right now. So I want to keep it nice and short. So what this is doing is it's then giving me this bullet point format, and you can see as part of the meeting it knows that, for example, Hannah's concerned about the adoption and training of users, and she's most excited about seamless integration with other Microsoft products. So that's fantastic. We can use that now to be extracted out, and we can put this into our follow-up proposal, our workshop report, so we can address what people are most concerned about, and we can basically remind them about what they're most excited about, which is all increasing the chances that we are going to actually win the project off the back of this particular workshop. So now we've done our workshop, we can use things like, as I said before, Copilot inside of Teams, which knows exactly who said what and when. We can see a full kind of log of exactly what was discussed, the meeting notes and things like that. And then we can choose to copy all of that. And for example, you could paste this into OneNote, you could paste this into Loop. There's loads of places you could potentially paste this into. But if you were to put inside of OneNote, you can also use Copilot as well. Now this is fantastic for doing things like getting a bit of a summary. So as a consultant, it might be that I do a workshop on a Friday, but I don't actually get time to do the write-up for a few days later, so it may be mid next week. So I could come back in here and I could ask it for a bit of a summary to understand what actually this project is. I could also ask it to create things like tables. So Copilot could create a table of, say, for example, all the stakeholders from that particular workshop. And then I can paste this alongside the notes I've been taking during the meeting, which fleshes out all of the things I'm going to need for my workshop report afterwards. Again, if I wanted to, I didn't include it in this example, but you could, for example, have that table include the stakeholder, their main objectives, what they're most concerned about, and what they're most excited about. So fantastic things to include as part of the workshop report. Now we've got all of our notes together. One of the other things that we often do during a workshop is we often take, for example, if it's a SharePoint workshop, we build what we call a site map, which is basically an Excel spreadsheet of all the different SharePoint sites we're going to create, what department they're for, who's going to own them, the security model, whether they're restricted or open, what type of site are they, communication site or team site, and so much more. This is just a proof of concept demonstration. But you can see then once I've got it into Excel, I can use Copilot to ask it to do things like visualize the amount of teams or communication sites. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm actually terrible with Microsoft Excel, and I find Copilot fantastic at doing all these things like creating visuals and charts, finding insights I just never would have found, or even writing out formulas that I didn't know how to do myself. So there you can go. You can see it's now created a table, and it's got some little insights for me here. So you can see that the most team or communication sites is sales, and with 15 followed by IT with 10. So you can see here it's now put that table nicely into an Excel document for me, and we can even choose to further refine it if we wanted to as well. I could ask more questions like which content owner has the most sites. So this is really useful information. So as a consultant, I can go back to the customer to say, hey, did you know that actually Derek actually has the most SharePoint sites assigned to him? So that might not be fair. You might not necessarily have the bandwidth or time to manage that amount of SharePoint sites. So it might be an insight to know to go back to the customer and say, maybe we need to go back to the drawing board a little bit with this and make sure it's fair. And again, we can see Copilot starting to understand the information that we're providing, and it's giving us questions. So this was actually a question it thought of itself. So what is the most common restricted or open security model? And again, it's an insight as a consultant I can go back to my client with and say, did you know that most of your SharePoint sites are set to restricted? Which, and given the pros and cons, that's fine. It's going to be very secure. It's a very good security model to have it restricted. However, it is going to increase the amount of administration time it takes to add and remove people from the different SharePoint sites. So that's Copilot in Excel. Then following on from the story, we've now got all of our notes, we've got all of our information. Actually, this is just a fast track but you could then use all of that to create your Word document. We are going to look at how we create PowerPoint from Word in a second, but as I say, you can create Word documents from your notes to get you to this stage. The bit I wanted to show you here is actually once we've got our workshop report together, one of the things which is very important as a consultant is I want to make sure that this document is as best quality as possible to give me the best chance actually the client purchasing the project off the back of this. So I want to make sure that we've got a good chance of this. Now, one thing you can do with Copilot is you can ask it to take the role of somebody. You could say, take the role of the customer receiving the SharePoint intranet proposal. Is there anything missing from it that you would influence basically to purchase the project? Now, obviously, this is just a proof of concept, the document itself, so there's probably going to be a lot of stuff that's actually missing, but hopefully this picks up on all of it. So it's now going to have a look over the document, it's combing through that, and it's comparing it against other documents that I've done in the past before. And again, this is saving time. This is saving, usually I would have a colleague do this as a kind of first draft. Now it's actually finding loads of information and saving my colleague time having to sort of proofread the document. So basically now what it's found is a series of things that it believes that if I was to action or add to the document would increase the chances of converting into a project. So if I just skim through this a little bit, it talks a lot about design and user experience. So maybe I should include a bit more about that. Maybe there's not much talking about security and compliance. Maybe I should add some information on that. There's no references or case studies included in this document currently. These are all fantastic ideas for what I could do to improve this document. Again, I could feed more information into it. I could feed those things which were what people are most excited about. Have I covered off everything which they're excited about? Here's everything that everyone said they were concerned about. Have I covered everything, or is there anything else I could do to alleviate those concerns? But again, this is all going to be impacting how the chances are converting my sort of workshop into an actual project. And then finally, I said those workshop documents could be massive. They could be 8,000, 10,000 words. We don't want to necessarily be going to our customers and having to give them that whole document and sit on a few hour long meeting with them to hand that over. We want to let them consume it in their own time. So instead, we want to create a pitch deck. Now, inside of PowerPoint, I could go in and I could go to Copilot and say, hey, go and create me a pitch deck from a specific document. So I can select my test workshop report here, and it will then say, okay, well, here's all the pages I'm going to create. Because I've not told it exactly what pages and slides I want it to create, it's going to be a bit sort of, well, basically it's going to provide me more than what I need. It's going to tell me all the pages that it's going to create. I'm just going to fast forward this a little bit, and you can see now it's generating the slides, and it will actually tell you what slides it's going to create. You can see it starts to appear here before they actually get created, but then it springs into life and it's created all these slides. Now, you could do this from a branded template already if you had one. And it would basically use all the sort of templated slides and colors and things like that, or you can apply it afterwards, which we'll see. But you can see it's generated this from the workshop report. It's brought through the agenda, the attendees, the objectives. It's also brought through tables and images. And if there's no image that it's got to pull through, it will even use the PowerPoint stock image library itself. So that image there you're seeing isn't part of the Word document. It's brought it through itself. Then, as I say, if I've not used a branded document, I could always go ahead and choose to apply the brand colors and themes afterwards, and that gives me my kind of final result. As I say, I still need to edit this. There's probably a lot of slides I need to remove, but at least it's getting me that kind of 80% of the way there, and it's just a case of small tweaks and changes. Rather than spending hours on a pitch deck, we're now spending 10, 20 minutes on creating one. So that's Microsoft 365, the Copilot for Microsoft 365, and a short journey of how this is actually being used.